I'm not too sure what stands out for each individual about that particular set of references, but they are, I'm grateful for whatever people's memories and history allows to be put forward. But I'd like to just introduce myself a little bit less formally, and then ask you what you do and what your life situations are. But is the expectation, or is the assumption this evening that we're talking about the importance of book distribution? Is that?
So, yeah, I mean, Saturday is Srila Prabhupada's disappearance.
Yes.
So if you're happy to share some perhaps sort of your experiences with Srila Prabhupada, how they inspired you in terms of your Sankirtan mission, and maybe some Sankirtan inspiration for us all.
Okay, well, you're getting on to...
whatever you feel you want to say. Right?
Yeah, but it's deep. That's a deep thing when you talk about what inspires someone. So I'm just going to keep it light to begin with anyway, because the real purpose of what we're going to talk about is a deep subject. It's in terms of taking on devotional service. It's always important that that your service has meaning, and the context is very much in line with serving Krishna, serving Prabhupada, serving the devotees. But just to begin, I joined in Bury Place, and I visited there in 1972 and 73, came here in 73, saw Prabhupada speak. And in a particular time of my life, I had nothing, no money, nowhere to stay. And I remembered that the devotees had asked me to come and stay. So I thought, I've got somewhere to go. So I came to the temple. And I was thinking that I was only going to come for a short time. I would learn how to practice spiritual life and how to just to get to know Bhagavad Gita mainly, because I'd already read several editions of it. And then my plan was I had some money coming, so my plan was to go back to New Zealand where I was born and buy a farm and have a self-sufficient existence. And so that was how Krishna tricked me into coming here. And before long, I found that I was the temple commander in Bury Place, and then the temple commander here at Bhaktivedanta Manor. And in those days, it was all devotees living in the ashram, and the building was run down. There was holes in the windows. There was no heating, no hot water. So the emphasis was on trying to severalfold. One was how to look after this temple that Krishna had given us. And Prabhupada made it clear that through developing the Indian community and book distribution, they were the two things that by which we could maintain. But then associated with that was making devotees. In order to develop the Sankirtan mission of Lord Chaitanya, it was obvious with just a few pages of Prabhupada's books that making devotees, or what we call making devotees, like it's some sort of manufacturing process. But actually making devotees means preaching. And preaching means helping people understand what their real nature is, who they are, where they've come from, what their purpose of life is, etc. So I'm thrilled these days when I see, we are talking about Prabhupada's Disappearance Day, but any festival, Janmashtami, I see thousands, particularly of young faces. And they are Prabhupada's prediction. But the idea was to bring about a revolution in consciousness. Prabhupada was instructed by his spiritual master, and that was because Lord Chaitanya had said that was the prime duty of every devotee. In our sampradaya, certainly, that it wasn't just to practice and to make ourselves spiritually advanced. But if I go back a little bit, I've raced ahead a little bit. My professional life, my daytime life, is I'm a bookseller. I import books from India and sell them all over the world. And I learnt, when I went to school, I was too stupid to study properly, but smart enough to know that if I just read the back of the book and memorized a précis, I could pass exams. So my school life was mostly spent just playing sport, hanging out. I loved school. It was great. You do nothing, basically. And exams weren't hard to pass. So, and then I left school and I became a school teacher, which again was a breeze, easy. But when I graduated, I realized that actually I knew nothing. I had this qualification as a teacher, but all I was doing was regurgitating knowledge in books. But what I did learn was that books are very important. That all of us, we know so many things. If I go around and ask what you do in your daytime life, you've gained some knowledge from books or from people speaking about books. But knowledge is what makes careers, maintains people's livelihoods. It's what's quoted in courts, it's what's quoted in parliaments, it's all coming from books. So I'm not too sure exactly when, but when I first visited Bury Place, I was living with somebody who became a devotee and I went to visit him in around Christmas time in 1972. And I got a Back to Godhead magazine and a Bhagavad Gita and lots of Back to Godhead magazines and other books. And in there, in one of the Back to Godhead magazines, it had a list of all the great thinkers, the great philosophers and the great historians and psychologists and political thinkers, spiritual thinkers. So I thought, oh, I must read all those books. I didn't think, oh yeah, they come to, the conclusion of spiritual life. So I started reading a lot. Every time, every minute of the day I had a book with me, or 2 or 3 books often, reading several books at a time. And I was all the political philosophies, all the psychology, all the spiritual, obviously the Bible and the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and everything I could get my hands on from every teacher. I chose my job somewhere where I could do a lot of reading. I was building the London Underground, the Jubilee line, what's now the Jubilee line, and my job was emptying railway wagons full of mud that they were digging from the front. And the railway wagons would only come every 40 minutes or so, and so I would work hard for 10 minutes, and then I'd have another 40 minutes, and I'd just read. And I did that for many, many months. And then it was a high-paying job, and I went down to the very south of Morocco for the rest of the winter and just read and meditated, prayed. What is the purpose of life? Why am I here? How can I use this life to the best advantage? And how can I leave the world a better place after this life? What can I do to help the world and myself? So somehow or other, from previous lives, obviously, I was motivated not to become, wealthy or, a big famous person. It was just, how can I use this life to the very best advantage? And that stuck with me. So the point I'm making is that books are at the foundation of everybody's knowledge. Yash was just telling me he's a doctor, so that's a lot of study. You are taking knowledge from thousands of people's study and their conclusions. And can I just ask what anyone else does in their daily life?
I'm a retired civil servant.
Okay, in the British government? What department?
The Home Office.
Home, okay. Immigration? Yeah. So you've got to follow all the rules, all the acts of parliament.
Which are always changing.
Which are always changing, absolutely. Anyone else? What?
I'm an accountant.
Okay. So you've got to study a lot. Pass exams. Make sure you follow the right protocols, because there's do's and don'ts. What do you do?
I do the same. I work
Accountancy?
Accounting.
And anyone else? What do you do?
I'm retired art teacher.
Art teacher, okay. So art is one of those classic things that you have standards. There are things that by which art is measured. And people are always changing it and challenging it. The same with politics and with accountancy and medicine. So, and I literally have 120,000 titles in my inventory. And I specialize in books from India, books from Indian publishers, generally in English. And so there's every single thing you can think of, the study of insects or the nature of time or the history of this or everything. There's knowledge of everything. But there's very few books that deal with who you are. What is your real identity? Your eternal identity. What is, and so I'm applying this to myself. What is my eternal identity? And of course, I had read the Penguin edition of Bhagavad Gita, and what struck me just in that edition was that there was knowledge of 7 of these and 3 of those and 5 of those and 4 of those. The material energy was broken down into so many compartments of knowledge, every one of them interesting. The modes of nature, the earth, water, fire, ether, and then mind, intelligence, ego. All these things are fascinating in themselves. And sciences are dedicated to the study of water or the study of fire or the study of earth. But Prabhupada's Gita was, through his purports and the nature of the translation, even today, I don't think I need to do much more reading. I do need to, but I don't think I need to do that much because I've already learned the basics through Prabhupada's Gita of who I am, why I'm alive, but also how I can implement what to do about that situation. The study of the material energy is what I've just talked about. That's what most people, in fact, everyone is involved with. And some take it further, whether it's knowing all the averages of every footballer or cricket player, or how the currencies of the world are moving, and how, you can get down to very fine details of what's happening today, but it doesn't deal with the eternal nature of things. So, going back to when I joined, I very soon started hearing that this wasn't just a yoga center, because I had done loads of meditation and reading of yoga books particularly. I had gravitated particularly towards Indian spiritual knowledge. And I wanted to experience silence, to still the mind completely, because then I could realize my pure self, free from the mind. So I went deep into the Sahara. I hitchhiked right into the deep Sahara, and because I wanted to meditate somewhere where there was pure silence, where there was no material distractions at all. And I did that for some time, but I found out that there's no such thing as complete silence, because the mind goes with you and it's constantly active. I couldn't shut it up. I couldn't still it or control it. I could shout at it, discipline it. And by that time, I already knew the Maha Mantra, and the only way I could still it was just by chanting Hare Krishna. Still, even today, the mind still, while you're chanting japa, we all have the experience. The mind still is restless. It's dangerous. It races off and contemplates all sorts of things. So then you have to have some intelligence to be able to control that mind, not just the Maha Mantra, but some intelligence, and you get that from books. You get information about the Krishna's pastimes, the nature of things. Again, the mind is very dangerous in the sense that it tells us to like and dislike things, people, to find fault. It's not to be trusted. And the old thing, if you beat it with a shoe, and or a stick in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon. It's a figurative thing, but it does work. You just don't take it seriously. So the power of books is where I'm going to join up the purpose of what we're talking about, and that is the purpose of distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. Because they have so much knowledge, they're heavy with knowledge. And we all have the experience. Just you can open up any page and just read a paragraph or a sentence, and it's something that you can contemplate and think on just try to absorb. And you can go back to the same paragraph a year later and it's fresh. It's still meaningful. So in living in the ashram and practicing Krishna consciousness and attending the morning program and learning mantras, we're given what's called a sadhana. Our sadhana is to help us train the mind and to build up good habits. And you can make advancement with good sadhana. It's always been the case. And some people are better at it than others. I'm no good at it. I was never much of a sadhana bhakti. Mainly, I have to confess, I have little attraction to spontaneously chanting, deity worship, and the fine things to do with having a regulated sadhana. But when I learnt that more than sadhana, you need mercy, the mercy of Krishna, Radharani, your guru, the devotees, by getting the grace of the devotees, by getting, this is what Radharani's service is. She brings other, in her case, gopis, to Krishna for his pleasure. And this is Lord Chaitanya's mood, that you bring conditioned souls to a platform of realizing who they are and then implementing in their lives both a sadhana, but also giving them causeless mercy. So it's not that a butcher is less qualified than a banker, or somebody who's, a drunkard is not able to access the mercy of the devotees of Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. Anyone can access this mercy principle, and it's more powerful than sadhana. It's a secret weapon that Prabhupada has given us, that I have witnessed, we've all witnessed, devotees who are very fixed up in their sadhana for years and years, and then they can't maintain it. And they drift away in one form or another. Maybe because they've lost interest or they've made offenses or whatever, but we're all dependent on the mercy of Krishna, again, the whole parampara. And ultimately it means the mercy of the devotees in general. Krishna can see. We can't approach, Prabhupada tells us, we're reliably informed that you can't approach Krishna. He is so great. He makes 1 million leaves turn autumn at the same time as making 1 million leaves grow in the spring on the other side of the world, and millions of trees. And this is just one thing in the creation that's happening. I mean, we can't approach him directly. And Prabhupada makes the point, you have to have a guru that you serve. So we're dependent on that mercy principle. Sometimes Prabhupada calls it grace. But we're definitely dependent on that mercy principle. And the good thing is, it's available to everybody. You don't have to be a child, an old man or woman. You don't have to be particularly intelligent. You just have to be sincere. And that's what book distribution is. you're approaching on behalf of Prabhupada and serving his Guru Maharaj. We're approaching the public. Please take this book. As Prabhupada said, what's your talk? You can talk and preach for 10 minutes, but then they will forget and go away. But if you give them a book, then they can read and that will stay with them forever. They can pick that book up any time. And there were so many very encouraging things he said, like even if they touch the book, it's a spiritual connection to Krishna. If they read even one word or one line or one paragraph, their spiritual life has begun. So Prabhupada gave us so much encouragement to distribute these books. And whenever we would finish in 1 year or a month and report a certain amount of scores, then he'd say, double it. And then once you've doubled it, double it again. Because the whole world is suffering through lack of self-realization, through lack of understanding who they are, why they're here, what is the purpose of their life. And ultimately, everyone's going to die. Ultimately, everyone has a limited time span, and this life is their big chance. We've all been through so many births. We're reliably informed that we've all been through so many births. And it's only in the human form of life that spiritual development is possible. So, turning it into a personal thing, when I gradually realized that through distributing Prabhupada's books, that I could get his mercy, and it was something that pleased him. In those days, I don't know, is there a Sankirtan newsletter now that you're aware of? I've never seen it, but how does it work? When does it come out?
So I think there's different Sankirtan newsletters.
Okay.
I think there must be a more broader European one.
But there's one just for the UK?
There is one just for the UK as well.
I've reported scores to it, but I've never seen the results. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was there was an international Sankirtan newsletter that was started about 74, certainly 75, 1975. There was an international Sankirtan newsletter which was basically addressed to Srila Prabhupada. Dear Srila Prabhupada, this is how many books we have distributed in this past week. It would come out every week. And every temple in the world would report. And it became probably the most unifying thing in the whole of the society. The book distribution, the Sankirtan newsletter was something that every temple had in common and every devotee knew of it. And it was a way in which we could see the Sankirtan mission expanding, spreading, new temples opening, the number of devotees in temples growing. It was a mirror to Prabhupada's mission. And it made us very aware that this spiritual revolution, this revolution in consciousness was taking place. And the greediest amongst us, like myself, we wanted to get our names in that newsletter because we knew that Prabhupada was reading it. Otherwise, we were just one devotee amongst thousands. And, you want to please your guru, you want to You want to know that you're doing something significant. So we would compete to get our individual names in that newsletter, because the scores would be reported, and then the top hardback distributor, the top medium book distributor, small book distributor would be reported. And if there was multiple, really big scores, those would be reported. And then you had the name of the temple. And then you had the name of the country and the yatra and the GBCs, who all the temples were under a GBC. So they would be competing, the temples would be competing. And you see Mother Jagatam at the back there. She appeared in the newsletter regularly. And this is how you got to know devotees' names around the world. And there are still names I know now, and I've never met them, but I know that they were big book distributors. And sometimes you hear of, in current times, I hear of God brothers and God sisters leaving their bodies, and you remember their names. From that newsletter. So we very much developed a competitive spirit. Our entry was known as the Sri Sri Radha Londonishwara Radha Gokulananda Travelling Sankirtan Party. And that represented the two main temples and the men and women, both travelling and based in London, who were engaged 6 days a week in book distribution, and their whole timetable, their morning program and their daytime and their evening was all based around making ourselves as an efficient book distributor as possible. And of course that involved reading, it involved chanting your rounds, it involved helping each other. And every evening we would phone, wherever we were in the country, we would phone our scores in. If you know, I don't know if it's there now, where the telephone box underneath the stairs, is that there now? Okay, so there was, the only phone in the building was a public telephone that you put 2 pence in and make a phone call. So we'd all call our scores. It would mean we'd have to find a public telephone in the red. And so at the end of the day, you'd search for a telephone box to call the scores in. What it really was a community of devotees who were unified in competing for Prabhupada's pleasure. No, I still got this one, thank you. Competing for Prabhupada's pleasure. We took pleasure in glorifying those who were the best distributors, the best book distributors, and therefore the Lakshmi collectors. But many of us were not that good at it. They were, for one reason or another, they were shy, or they were, intimidated by the public or whatever. And they weren't big book distributors. But as a team, I think traveling men, we had 20. The men's party based in the UK, based in London, was probably about 8. The ladies' party was 12, Jagatam, something like that. Again, based in London. And London means doing all the doing. Selling books in the tourist locations. That's where you'd meet the most people who were traveling and had money, and you got books out to the whole world, because London is a big tourist destination. So literally, the biggest book distributors were those who were visiting Harrods, Madame Tussauds, the London Eye. I don't know if the London Eye was around then, but Oxford Street, the big tourist places. And of course, some people would get upset and chase you away, and the police would come and arrest us, and you'd go to court the next morning, and then you'd be back on Sankirtan at 10:30, and just carrying on with our Sankirtan mission. So that's what, and it was very much a unifying thing that every Sunday we'd have all the Sankirtan devotees would come back here to the Bhaktivedanta Manor, and we'd have a big festival, and the scores would be read out. And when there was a marathon, everybody in the yatra, everybody, maybe one cook and one pujari would not go out the full time, but they would go out part time. And our ambition was to beat all the other temples. This is what was known as a Mahalaj temple. I think Mahalaj was measured by having 50 devotees or more, something like that. And then it gradually grew because temples became bigger and bigger. But so we were competing with the Radha Damodar Traveling Party and Los Angeles and New York and Paris and all the big temples. And we wanted to win. We wanted to, and so that competition, and of course it required a lot of support from the GBC right through the whole of the temple structure. And as Yash just mentioned, we were doing 100,000 books, certainly a month, I think a week. 100,000 books around the UK with those 20 men and 12, 15 women, and then part-times on Saturday. And of course, when we had our own BBT in the UK where we were producing our own books, and we were able to, then the books were cheaper, so we could distribute more. And all these strategies were devised at gaining Prabhupada's attention to please him. And that comes back to what I was talking about, this mercy principle. By gaining the mercy, not just of the pure devotee, but of all the devotees, being able to see the pleasure that it gave, because when you do have literally millions of books. Actually, I'll just throw in a statistic here. When just trying to think what year, around 1998, when I stopped managing the BBT, we had sold 55 million books in the UK at that point. And that was the population of the country. That meant one book for every man, woman, and child in the country. But of course, a lot of them went outside of the UK as well. I've met many devotees who said they first got a book in London, and they were, they're from all over the world. But that was because it was the main activity. It was what we wanted to make devotees so we could increase the number of book distributors. And of course, there was a Bhakta program where people were trained up how their sadhana should be, but ultimately we would try and get as many as possible to go on book distribution. And it was very much a focus that And now that I'm not emotional, I just want to say the reason it is emotional is because you're looking for that mercy. Even though you're not qualified, we're not qualified as great yogis or learned scholars, expert pujaris. We're coming from completely materialistic backgrounds, especially if you're not born in an Indian family. You have no concept of spiritual culture. Almost all, no, it's got to be all meat eaters, all, expert at taking intoxication and illicit sex and gambling. Gambling probably not so much, but definitely not natural devotees. So Prabhupada engaged us, and it comes back to that mercy principle again that I'm trying to emphasize. That anybody can get mercy. And that's how you make spiritual advancement. You're not dependent on how many slokas you learn or how nicely you tie your sari or your dhoti and how you dance in Mangalati. That's not a measurement of pleasing Krishna. It's pleasing Guru and Krishna and the devotees. And by giving out spiritual knowledge, you leave the result to Krishna. You don't want necessarily to see the result immediately there, right in front of you. That person, I've convinced them, yes, they're going to become a devotee and they're going to be initiated tomorrow. That doesn't happen. You leave the result to Krishna. And all the Sankirtan devotees I know, and I know a lot, they all prayed constantly. Prayed for various things. Sometimes it was just give me the courage to be able to talk to people. Give me the words to say the right thing that's applicable to the person you're standing in front of. Protect me from angry Christians, angry Muslims, angry communists, because that's what you meet. When you're on the street and you're saying, excuse me, take this book, you come up against the material energy in its rawest forms. It's some people, they just hate you straight away. You're disturbing my day. And what is this rubbish you're distributing? There's only Christ and he's the only way, and you're going to go to hell if you carry on reading this. And in my day, and in all the countries I have done book distribution in, we didn't have much trouble with Muslims. But I can imagine today that is one of the main oppositions in the streets of Britain and in the streets around the world, because there is an element of that following that are quite fanatical. And so the answer is not to avoid, but the answer is to learn philosophy so you can answer, so you can deal with points. And generally you have to learn their Shastra as well as your own Shastra so you can quote it back to them. And let me ask you, Jagatam, how many languages were you able to distribute books in?
I think I knew about 5 different languages just to say, hello, how are you, basically.
Yeah.
Well, we used to distribute Arabic books sometimes around Marble Arch area because there were so many Arabic people.
Yeah. But especially in London, I mean, I easily 8 languages. I know enough to sell a book in. And I learnt them on the street by talking to people and asking them, how do you say how much? And how do you say, how are you? Yeah. Have a look in your pocket and see what you can afford. So devotees have to learn how to deal with the public in front of them in order to reach and to convince them. And you pray to that super soul inside that person. Please allow them to give up their preconceived ideas and take this book. You pray directly to the super soul in everyone. At least that was my experience, and I'm sure other devotees have their own experiences. But it's not because you're clever and you have some magic potency or some, trickery. It doesn't, book distribution and Sankirtan doesn't work like that. But there is, how am I doing for time? Are we going to 8:30?
Yeah.
So let me ask you, because I've done all the talking. Is there any questions or, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for giving us your time. It's so valuable to hear from you. I was contemplating about this question, and it may sound quite cheap, but could you share the most miraculous encounter that you've had, the most amazing exchange that you had with someone where you felt like this had been arranged by Krishna? It wasn't coincidental. This was.
It happens multiple times every day.
Most memorable.
Well, I don't know. Let me start, and I'll see if something comes to me. But we all had that experience when you get together in the evening over a cup of hot milk, or you're, counting the Lakshmi that you've collected. We would share stories amongst ourselves. I met this amazing person today. You wouldn't believe, they said, I've been looking for this book. I've been looking for this Bhagavad Gita for years. I haven't been able to find it. Or I've read one book and I've been praying that I can get another book by the same author. So we used to refer to those people as gems or sweets, or, you'd meet some really sweet people who were either suffering and crying out for some answer, or they have read a book already and they've been going back to the same street and the same place, hoping they could meet another devotee and get another book. There are countless instances of, and it's Krishna's arrangement. When these things happen, it's Krishna's arrangement, and you just feel so grateful that you've been able to be an instrument in that person's journey, in their particular stage in life. I've met, it's hard to, you meet people who are very influential. You recognize someone as a famous musician or a politician or a, newsreader on TV or something. You meet people like that. But mostly it was just meeting ordinary people who they were just sweet and innocent, and the world was bashing them about. And they were just desperate for some spiritual sustenance, something to maintain them. So I can't give you any one particular thing. I'm sure I could come up with. Okay, let me give you one story. I was sent to Kenya. They had printed books in Swahili, but they didn't have any distributors. They didn't know how to sell any of Prabhupada's books. So they had one boy who was from Ethiopia, and he had done a bit of Sankirtan, but he didn't really know what was going on in other places. So, is this from...
It's from the deities.
Oh, my head's too big. It's too swollen. Who's it from?
Who's it from, Sean?
The deities downstairs, they're from the...
You don't know which deity?
It's like small Radha Krishna or Gauri.
Yeah, it must be.
Okay, I shouldn't be so selective. Jai. Thank you. Anyway, I'll just tell you this story. It's not exactly what you're asking for, but it's a case of, for me, something that amazed me. That I found that by going to the central bus station in Nairobi, which is the capital, and buses were going all over the country, literally to every direction. So I could reach every part of Kenya by distributing in the bus station. And I'd go onto a bus and make an announcement in Swahili. Ladies, something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm distributing books about God. Give what you can, and it gives you something to read on your journey. And normally, if the first people near you reached into their pockets, then they would all do it. It would be a chain effect. And I'd just give them the book and say, can you give something? And if they gave, if you can start the first few doing it, then everybody on the bus. And you do 30 or 40 books or magazines in a bus. And then you jump off and get on the next bus. You don't know where it's going. You're just in the fire and you're just constantly going. So anyway, so somebody shouted from the back. He stood up and shouted aggressively. And I didn't know what he said. And there's a man sitting in the front seat next to me. And he turned out to be a headmaster. And he said, he wants to know, who is your God? And you can't go to heaven but through Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He's, you have to be, and their mantra is that you have to be bathed in the blood of Christ. And without Christ, you can't go to heaven. So the man next to me, told me this. So I said, can you tell him he's right? But when you go to school, there's different levels of understanding on every subject. And you've become very expert at the primary level, I can see. But beyond the primary level, there is a secondary level. And there's a university level. And when you get to those higher levels, you learn what God looks like, what he likes to eat, who his friends are, what he does, and how he leads his life. There's higher knowledge. So his next challenge was, you are asking for money. The Christians give their books away for free. You're just collecting money. That's all you're doing. So I said, well, a primary school, in Kenya, primary school's free, isn't it? And they said, yeah. And I said, secondary school, there are private schools and there are free schools. But university, you have to pay for. If you want the highest knowledge and to be the most qualified, you have to pay. And you don't have to, you might get subsidies, you might get your parents to pay for it for you, but it costs something. So I'm just asking, and of course the language there, penny moja, penny tatu, penny, rattled off, give, what you can. So then somebody else stood up and said, well, if you know what God looks like, tell us what God looks like. And of course they were all going, yeah, come on, tell us. So I said, he looks more like you than me. And do you know what the color of a dark rain cloud is? And they're all, well, yeah, it's a blackish blue, isn't it? It's a very dark blackish blue. So that's the color of God. That's the color of Krishna. And you just have to read. Don't believe me. Just read it in the book. Everybody on the bus took books. But not just that. Not just that, but they were asking for 10s and 20s to take back to their families. So then they started shouting at the people in the next bus, you'll never guess. It just became like a tsunami of people demanding books. Instead of me trying to get them to take one or two, hundreds and hundreds of books were going out by the minute. And you could see, I was just thinking, how did this happen? How did it turn from a challenge about one person and one book to, I don't know how many books it was, but I distributed, the magazine is called Ruda Kwa Mungu, Back to God, like Back to Godhead. And I did thousands of them that day. And people in other buses were telling their driver, drive over there, we want those books. So it wasn't an individual, but it was just like an explosion of book distribution that you wonder, you just know that it's Krishna's behind it, that it's something that happens and it's spontaneously self-magnified. From that, I learnt in book distribution in general to gather crowds. So I'd stop two people, maybe two girls who were together, and I'd be talking to them about it. And then any other groups of girls who came by, I'd call them over and ask them to join. And have you heard about this? And get them to. So you tell them what I've told you, and then I'd have two more. So gathering groups of 5 and 10 and 15 people, of like-minded people. Thank you. It's very kind of you. And that you can appreciate the effect of, instead of just distributing one-to-one, you distribute to groups, multiple people. I used to be afraid of approaching groups because they'd take the mickey and jeer and make fun of you and that sort of thing. Groups were hard to deal with. But once you learn how to deal with a group, you pick the leader, you pick the strongest character, compliment them, and then pick up on something that they're going to like, and then it doesn't always work, but if you can distribute books to a group, you magnify your Sankirtan by 5 times or 10 times, and that's anyway. That's a long answer to a simple question. Anybody else got any other things, Jagatam?
I was just wondering about this, that when we distributed books back in the 60s and 70s, and books were thing that people read, but nowadays everyone is going on their devices and they don't like books so much. So what would you suggest? How do you approach people? We have these very beautiful books, but what do we do in that?
Well, my answer would be that people still like the feel of books and they like to have them on their shelves and that sort of thing. But of course, what the BBT has done recently is if you buy the book, you automatically get a key to get the ebook as well. So the ebook is free with the printed copy. Or an audio book. You can get an audio book for free now with the printed copy. So I was a little bit against it because I thought we should be selling the ebooks, but that's why they did it. That ebooks are now available free if you buy the printed book. And of course, with ebooks are dependent on having a source of electricity or a battery. The light conditions have to be right. So there are downsides to having either on your phone or on a what's it called? These bigger Kindle. No, there's another word that I'm looking for, but there's many devices. That's your point. There's many devices that people can use, both for reading and for listening and such things. And of course, we have to move with the times in that regard. But that's the answer that I would give. That if you buy the book, then you get access to the ebook as well as audio book. And the audio books, I think, are fantastic. While you're driving or, I don't know, mowing the lawn or ironing or anything, you can be listening. Particularly for driving, long drives, they're really good. Audio books. Anybody else on anything? Go on.
So I focus on back to God, if I do. And I just wanted to your problem question. First of all, you mentioned you've distributed back to God in your previous years. So how would you kind of explain that to a passerby as opposed to a normal book? Is there something unique or any kind of attribute of back to God that you think would be more appealing to a passerby that I could, take a cue from? And also generally, what is your approach when you speak to people?
When you're distributing it back to God?
Yeah.
Magazine. It's. I'll ask Jagatam to give her answer to that, but I'll give mine first. I look out for something about the person that I can relate to them, either their age or their gender or their, the way they dress. You can tell something about them. And you relate to them in that way. Some people look scholarly. They look, other people, they don't look like they've read a book in 100 days, 100 years. So you talk about their, muscles or their clothes or their hairstyle or something that, when you've got some time, have a read of this because it's really different to other magazines, and I think you'll find something in there that you'll agree with. Not to challenge their identity, but try to complement and enhance their identity. I don't, saying things like "you're beautiful" is really quite shallow, and most people wouldn't wash at all. So you don't compliment in that way, but just the you're young, you obviously know what's going on in the world. You have a read this. Is a really good article and hear about such and such. So that would be my. You need to know what's in the magazine, what the articles are. That's the best start. And if I'm distributing back to Godhead or Beyond Birth and Death, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishad, you say something that's in the book. There's that verse in the first canto that this Bhagavatam is as brilliant as the sun. It's it's appeared after the disappearance of Lord Krishna, and it's you probably know the verse better than me, but you know the verse I mean. It's the Raja Vidya. It's the king of education. It's the and it really does give the impression that this is the best book. This is and it is. It is. It backs it up with what you read. So yeah, to memorize, obviously I haven't memorized that sloka for a while, but it does start off with as brilliant as the sun.
That's another quick question as well. So if there's a number of people in front of you, do you selectively choose who you're going to approach, or do you think to yourself that they're all spirit souls and whoever comes in my way, I will...
You mean a group of people coming down the footpath?
Yeah, so say you've got a choice, there's two people, one on the left, one on the right.
Yeah.
Is it correct for us to delineate within ourselves and say, I'm going to go for A?
I do. Personally, I do practice some discrimination, yeah, as to who you approach. Generally, I would say somebody young with a bright face and has a happy disposition, you're going to have more success, and it'll be a happy exchange. But sometimes, you meet people who they're rushing, they're red in the face, they're obviously stressed, and you can reach them through that stress, saying, boy, I know how you feel. There's hardly a minute in a day, is there? Listen, what I do is read this. When you get a minute, have a seat and just read a few, paragraphs or a few sentences from here, and it'll really chill you out. Just try to use the circumstance. And if they get aggressive, just move on to the next person. But yeah, I've a really good book distributor. It's a real pleasure to watch them. It's a spiritual, mystical thing that happens, that they turn the person into a willing reader. They're actually thirsting to now read what you're offering them. That's not easy to do, but and it's different with different people. But you do find that some devotees are better at it than others, and of course, you get all sorts of combinations, the man-woman thing, or a black guy, or obviously a staunch Muslim or something like that. You've got to be flexible in how you approach, not one way with everybody. Again, in central London, you use English to introduce yourself or to open a conversation, but then you find out. Sometimes you can tell by the accent, sometimes you tell by a little pin or something like that. And if you say, comment ça va, just speak a little bit of French, and they go, oh, you speak French. I go, un peu. You make a few words and try and switch it back to a language that you're more comfortable in. But yeah, you can, you work with a huge variety of options all the time, but you also, as I say, you're praying, you're thinking, Krishna, you're in the heart of everybody. Please help me here. Help me. How do I reach this person? Because what we're trying to do is take them and introduce them to Krishna and introduce them to their own spiritual lives. So it's a mystical. It's not a set formula that you apply to, like a chemical formula that you apply to everybody. And I have found at times that you just feel like you're Krishna's instrument. You end up saying something, you think, wow, where did I get that from? How come I said that? But it just happens to be the right thing for that person. Yeah. You were going to Sorry, Jagdam. Go ahead.
I was thinking that the way you so beautifully talked about the mercy aspect. So I think if you see a distributor who's so attractive, it has to do with that mercy that's flowing through our parampara and through Prabhupada's mercy, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with our sadhana, you know, and how much, even sometimes we can't concentrate on our chanting or anything, but if we're trying, we're making the endeavor, then somehow Krishna comes through and our acharyas come through. So I think a lot depends on mercy.
It's the whole process is, you know, compassion for the living entity. You're not out there. I talked about competing to have a winning score, but ultimately your motivation is to be compassionate to. I mean, so many crazy things. I don't know when it started, but when you're on Sankirtan, you go into a shop and buy some fruit for lunch, and you offer it up and then eat it and then get back to book distribution. So it became a real thing that you don't just offer up a banana and an apple and a pear. You just offer up the whole shop. So many times I'd see devotees with their Brahmin threads and they're offering up the whole supermarket and thinking everybody who buys anything in here from now on is going to be blessed. Now, I don't know what Krishna thinks of that, but it's not bad. The motivation, the desire to benefit people is pure. So yeah, you know, devotees offer up whole fruit shops and then supermarkets and things with the idea of making people fortunate. When Prabhupada made the statement about even if they touch the book, their spiritual life has begun. And one of my godbrothers, who's no longer with us, Ananda Moya, he when he heard that, he thought, definitely the most unfortunate people, the people who are really going to hell, are butchers. So I'm going to distribute to butchers. So he would go into a butcher shop and ask them just to hold the book, just to take the book and have a look at it. And most of them wouldn't buy it. But his thing was just to get that butcher to touch the book and their spiritual life would begin. So that mercy aspect, and he was, you know, a very sincere devotee. He was definitely doing it with the right motivation. And occasionally they would buy a book and say, well, how much do you want? And they'd get some blood-covered money out of the till and give it to us. But that is the compassion of a devotee, that you're not saying who's qualified. You're looking for who most needs the mercy, who most needs a spiritual jumpstart in their life. And of course, I can remember doing Harinam in pubs. You go into, I remember in Cardiff, we went into a pub and went around all the tables and everybody joined in and they were clapping and the barman said, right, drinks on you, whatever you want, what can I get you? You know, they wanted to give us a beer. But of course, we didn't want a beer, but it made the whole place happy. And everybody was, you know, joining in and clapping, and other pubs you go into, they'd throw you out. But the idea was just to go into places where Maya was strong and try and break her hold on things. Did you have a question for him? Another one?
Yes.
Go on.
I'm really gritting my teeth for wanting to ask this, but I don't know if we would ever get this opportunity.
Okay.
taking a deep breath and asking, could you share the most memorable moment with Srila Prabhupada?
I can.
Could you repeat the question, please, Amita?
Can I share our most memorable moment with Srila Prabhupada? Whether it's the most memorable moment or the most memorable moment. But for me, the perfection of my life was carrying Srila Prabhupada in his palanquin from his room downstairs. That, for me, I can say, was the purest consciousness that I ever had. So that's, and I have it on my phone.
It was in 1977 when he came here.
Yeah. The temple president, Vichachavarya, kindly asked me if I would like to do that. And of course I jumped at it. And probably for 5 or 6 days. So I would go into his room here, and he'd already be sitting in his palanquin. The palanquin's there now in his bedroom with a white satin on. And I was at the front, and my godbrother Adhikata was at the back. We practiced for a good couple of hours with a big bag of flour on the palanquin, going up and down, because obviously when you're at the front and you're going down the stairs, you have to keep it high. You have to keep the palanquin high. And then when you're going, and when he was at the back, he had to keep it low. So Prabhupada was not being tipped off. So we practiced, we thought we had it, and yeah. So that for me is, some personal service that I was able to do. Very few of, most Prabhupada disciples never got to render personal service to him and never got to talk with him or write letters and get letters back. We were asked not to because Prabhupada could be kept free to translate his books. Only very early devotees really wrote letters. But yeah, so I think that's my personal standout moment. But there was many things attached to it, like seeing him up close, sitting where the Vyasasana is now and looking at Radha Gokulananda. Once in the morning, he was, I don't know if he was leading Jaya Radha Madhava or it was just a kirtan, but he was singing and froze, and he's obviously deep in meditation, and his hands were like playing the kartals, but they weren't playing. Do you remember, Jagatam, that particular? No? Anyway, we all stopped.
Oh, yeah, I do remember.
We all stopped, because if we're going to make a noise, if we keep chanting, we might disturb his meditation. So we were just in awe, just thinking, what do we do? Prabhupada was lost in whatever he was meditating on or seeing, or and then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, just chant. So we all just started chanting japa, and then gradually Prabhupada came out of it. So that was, things like that are very memorable. Another time he was talking, I think it might have been on his Vyasapuja day, his voice broke and he started not crying, but sobbing, thanking us for helping him serve Bhaktisiddhanta, his Guru Maharaj, that you are so kind, that you're helping me. Without you, I can't do anything. You're And another time he said, he has personally sent you all to help me. We knew that we weren't, angels coming from heaven or something like that. But that was Prabhupada's mood, that my Guru Maharaj has sent you all to help me. And I see that now. I can see all these young, boys and girls that are in the temple, every day, but on big festival days, I think, I'm sure I've given some of you a book in your last life. I'm sure that that Prabhupada has sent you, again, to help preach now. Because, in my generation, we'll all be gone in 5 or 10 years, 20 years, definitely we'll be gone. So we're very dependent on the younger devotees to maintain and carry on, develop, improve, and grow. And we know that, that for the next 5,000 years that the Sankirtan movement will take effect. You probably, I don't know if you saw, but for Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, I made a display. And that was, I asked all the temples around the world to send one copy of every book that was published in the previous year. And I got 400 books and book covers sent. And for me, it was just a very thrilling thing to see that how dynamic the movement is, how Vaishnavism is literally exploding around the world, is really going into every town and village, and all languages, all alphabets are being covered, and people are being reached. And in many countries, in very difficult circumstances, devotees in China always, they call it, we're concerned about the security situation. Devotees in Russia and Vietnam, and I got statements from all these different countries. I don't know, did you read any of them? From Ukraine, devotees were saying, we've had 41 devotees killed serving in the army. And at any one time, there's 100 devotees serving in the army in the front lines. So we have such an easy life in our practice of Krishna consciousness and our preaching. It's so much easier. Devotees in Russia are constantly, they said, we can't send you a statement because everything we send is, or read or telephone call, it's all monitored, it's all watched. And we can't be seen to say anything critical. China, same thing. I asked them, how many books? We said, we daren't tell you how many books we've printed because it will get raided and the government will confiscate them. And because they allow them to be printed because they think they're going to be exported. It's a business, but they don't want people preaching. And most of the devotees in China are old ladies. The government doesn't mind old ladies living in the temple, but they don't want young men giving up material life. So these are just some of the things that came from communicating with the rest of the world and understanding what a wonderful environment we have to practice and to preach and to communicate. In Prabhupada's time, if I can use that phrase, a lot of English devotees were sent around the world, a lot. Because in India, the American passport was not popular at all. America was allied to Pakistan, and India was allied to, Russia. And so there was a lot of suspicion. You've probably heard stories that they thought the temple, that it was a missile silo, or you're communicating with the MI5, not MI5, what do they call it? CIA. So a lot of Prabhupada wanted British passport holders or, non-American passport holders to go to India. And a lot of British devotees have gone to different parts of the world and opened temples and built society. Some of them are still doing it, are still there now, China's a good example. But Africa, all of Eastern Europe. So that missionary spirit is definitely there. So I'm relating that there's a lot of growth still for the society to do. Yeah. Any other points? It's 9:00. Go on, you have another turn.
Thank you very much for such beautiful stories and reminding us how compassionate, you were. It reminded me of a verse from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, don't unsettle the ignorant.
Yes.
And then Prabhupada...
Don't disturb their minds, yeah.
Don't disturb their minds. Prabhupada in the purport says, men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Lord Krishna advises us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. But the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord, because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being.
Yeah. And of course, Prabhupada recommends prasadam for that purpose. Some people, that's how you reach them. Prepare nice prasadam and you don't try and trouble them with philosophy. I remember when I was flying to Kenya, I went twice, and the cheapest way to get there was Aeroflot, the Russian airline, which meant stopping in Moscow for a day. So I was young and naive, and I thought, I'll do some book distribution in the airport in Moscow. So I took a whole lot of English, Bhagavad Gitas and Back to Godheads, and as much as I could carry in a shoulder bag. And I was looking for, army officers and educated people, people holding responsible positions. That's who I was trying to approach. And I just sit down next to them and ask them if they spoke English, and if they did, then I would introduce a book to them. But in relation to that verse, once I sat down next to a man, and a cleaning lady came by. She had her mop and a bucket and was cleaning the floor. And when I pulled the book out, she went, Biblia, like that. Just almost threw up. She was just disgusted that she thought it was a Bible, right? And she could tell it was a religious book, and really out loud, like exclaiming it to dozens and dozens of people. And I thought, oops, I've done the wrong thing at the wrong time with the wrong person. I just, there was no way she was going to think, oh, that's a nice book, let me have a look at it. So, and of course I was frightened I was going to be arrested, but I wasn't. I would say, in the execution of Sankirtan and, preaching, I was arrested and kept under house arrest in Morocco, arrested and jailed in Tunisia under armed guard, probably arrested in the UK 20 times, something like that, but never kept in jail, generally bailed. But they'd confiscate the money and they'd confiscate the records and the books, and you'd have to go to court. And it was generally on the basis of soliciting without a permit, or disturbing the public. A member of the public would complain that this person's harassed me. It'd be on that sort of level. But there's a very respected devotee who used to be the temple president here by the name of Vichitravirya. And he was wise enough in the early days to say, don't fight with the police, don't fight with the law, don't fight with authorities, work with them. Get to know them give yourself the reputation of being a gentleman, not an agitator. So he changed our approach that always be very respectful of other people and respectable about yourself. And when you're dealing with the law, just apologize to the police. I'm really sorry, I didn't, because a lot of us would get self-righteous. Well, we're representing God. Who are you, demon? And some devotees would do that. But his thing was no, be respectful, and Vaishnavas should be known as thorough gentlemen. And he changed, and a lot of countries didn't do that. And so, as a consequence, places like Germany, the movement's not popular there. France, the movement's not popular there, because the devotees, this is my opinion, this is not Shastric, because they adopted the wrong approach and confronted authority rather than working with it. Here, we worked with the Charity Commission, we worked with the Parliaments, both houses of Parliament, the British High Commission, the Indian High Commission. We got them as an ally to convince the authorities that we were a bona fide philosophy and religion. And it took time. But working with authority figures is very important. And befriending them. You take them prasadam, you talk philosophy with them, not down to them. Respect, most of them will have good human values, about people, kids shouldn't be beaten, and, minorities should be protected, and, I think the social issues that you can agree on. But yeah, that's, his name is Vichitravirya, and you won't hear that name very often. But he is one of the great heroes of the British Yatra. And because the movement was legalized and not challenged by authority in the UK, all the other Commonwealth countries followed. So Canada, New Zealand, Australia, India, they all respected British law and civil services, because they knew that if it's been tested by the British Civil Service, it's passed a stringent test. He is not really much recognized. His ashes, he wanted his ashes to be left in the lake here, but the lake at the time was very dirty. So his ashes are buried. Do you know where there's a Prince of Wales feathers out on the grass when you come out of the car park? Do you know the Prince of Wales feathers? His ashes are buried there. Yeah. And I regard him as one of the great fathers of this movement in this country. But there we go. That's just my very grateful impression of him. And he's the one who asked me to carry Prabhupada. So naturally, I'm very grateful to him. You have to go?
Yeah.
Anybody else? I think I've used up a lot of time. I've gone over time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good. I hope I've fulfilled what was my expected, anticipated role.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
Is it encouraging? Good.
Very much. Very much.
More than anything else, the mercy of the pure devotee is the most powerful thing. It will cover all offenses. It will cover all mistakes.
Yes.
Anything that you're not doing correctly.
And it's amazing that this mercy will continue for 10,000
Yeah.
years. This is true.
Yeah. I mean, Prabhupada said, that the demigods are queuing up to take birth,
Yes.
not just in this movement, but in this time.
This is the only way they can go back home.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that Lord Chaitanya appears. Let me see if I get this right. Lord Chaitanya appears once in every day of Brahma, and he lives a long, long, long time.
Yes.
So, of all the different incarnations, Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful. It's easiest to make spiritual advancement in this time than at any time in all the yugas. You think of all the births and deaths in that time.
That's one day of Brahma.
Yes, in one day of Brahma. So it is important. And there's so many I'll finish on this last note. I'm always amazed at how many simple things we've got to make advancement. Look, just like wearing neck beads, Tulsi neck beads. And we're reliably informed again that if you're wearing Tulsi at the time of death, then the Yamadutas won't take you. This is a huge asset.
I mean, wearing the tilak, if the Yamaduta is saying that they will not come here.
Wearing some tilak clay, the holy name, the Maha Mantra. It's so easy and free to be able to say the names of Krishna. It's easy to do. So there's so many things. Watering Tulsi, taking, just offering whatever you're eating mentally, and taking prasadam. There's so many ways to make spiritual advancement. In Satya Yuga, it was much harder to make spiritual advancement. Much harder.
Prabhupada has made it so easy.
He's made it easy, and he's Lord Chaitanya's messenger. So yeah, we're very fortunate.
Thank
So just as you go, please accept my obeisances without bending down. Namam Vishnupada Krishna Vista Mudale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Chinamani Namaste says what he lived Gauravani Pachani never say Shishanyavadi Paskachadish Turni. Thank you. Jai Prabhupada.